Hey there, everybody. Welcome. We're in the study called A Man After God's Own Heart, the life of David in the Bible, and today is part number 40 of this study. If you're just now discovering it, you got a lot of homework to catch up on. We are today in 2 Samuel chapter number 21. We're just going to see some interim period of time, nothing bombastic or fantastic is occurring. It's simply a couple of years in the life of Israel and David's reign over Israel that just show that struggles continue. Nothing is perfect, nothing goes easily or comes easily. We all just have to get up every morning, push through the hard times, and keep on moving forward for the Lord. And that's what we see here. There's going to be two primary stories here. One is going to be about the Gibeonite people and how Saul had done them wrong, and they're going to get some vengeance for that. And then the latter part of the chapter, the last 25%, we're going to see that Israel has to fight the Philistines yet again, and David's going to get too old for battle. And so, as a soldier, he's going to retire finally in this chapter. So 2 Samuel 21, read along in your Bibles with me if you're able to. Then there was a famine in the days of David 3 years, year after year, and David inquired of the Lord. And the Lord answered, It is for Saul and for his bloody house, because he slew the Gibeonites. So there's a famine happening. The crops aren't producing. The rain probably isn't falling like it ought to. And so 3 years this is going on. David goes to the Lord and says, Lord, what are you doing? Why are we struggling like this? And God tells him when Saul was the king, he slew the Gibeonite people, and he didn't have any right to do that. And so the decisions that we make sometimes haunt us later in our lives down the road, and that's what's happening for Israel now. Their misdeeds to the Gibeonites have resulted in this famine. That's God's judgment on them for what they did. And the king called the Gibeonites. So this is David now being proactive. He gets in touch with the people that were done wrong by Saul. And he says unto them, Now the Gibeonites were not, this isn't what David said, but a parenthetical bit of information. The Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. And the children of Israel had sworn unto them, and Saul sought to slay them in his zeal to the children of Israel and Judah. So we're told the Gibeonite people came from the Amorites, and they are not Israelites, but Israel had made them a promise that they wouldn't harm them, invade them, overtake them. But then Saul gets the big head and decides, you know what? I don't care what I said before. I'm going to go ahead and attack you all now. And so he does. So he did wrong by the Gibeonites after having promised them that they'd be okay. So David said unto the Gibeonites, What shall I do for you? And wherewith shall I make the atonement, that ye may bless the inheritance of the Lord? So David says, how can I make this right? What can I do to fix this problem that you have with us? Because God's already told David the reason that God is judging Israel with the famine is because of their treatment of the Gibeonites. So David feels like if he can make it right with the Gibeonites, then perhaps the famine will end. Verse 4, And the Gibeonites said unto him, We will have no silver nor gold of Saul, nor of his house, neither for us shalt thou kill any man in Israel. And he said, What ye shall say, that will I do for you. So it's interesting. They say, look, we don't want any money, if that's what you're thinking. Money is not going to take care of this thing, and we don't want you to kill anyone in Israel. And so David says, well, what is it? What can I do? And they answered the king, The man that consumed us, meaning Saul, and that devised against us that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the coasts of Israel. Let 7 men of his sons be delivered unto us, and we will hang them up unto the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, whom the Lord did choose. And the king said, I will give them. So this is an unusual situation here. They said, we don't want any money, and we're not looking for you to kill any of the men of Israel. But what we want 7 of Saul's descendants, and we want you to turn them over to us, and we're going to hang them to their deaths. That's pretty hardcore, isn't it? Well, Saul had killed many, many more of the Gibeonites than just 7. And so, how does David respond to that? Verse number, well, I already read it, didn't I? Verse 6, and the king said, I will give them. So David is going to turn over 7 of Saul's male descendants to the Gibeonites so that they can hang them. Verse 7, but the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the Lord's oath that was between them, between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. So Mephibosheth doesn't go. It's interesting, the way this is written, you wonder if David didn't consider sending Mephibosheth. After all, we talked about the discrepancy between his story and Ziba's story when David had to flee Jerusalem. He says he didn't kill him not because of Mephibosheth, but because of his promise to Jonathan. But, verse 8, the king took the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, whom she bare unto Saul, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and the 5 sons of Michal, the daughter of Saul, whom she brought up for Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Mahalathite. So he finds 7 grandsons of Saul. The first 2, let's see here, are the 2 sons of Rizpah. And then there are 5 sons that Michal is raising for Adriel. So these aren't the children of Michal. Those would be David's children in some sense. I'm trying to think if she had any children with the husband that Saul gave her to after he pulled her away from David. But anyways, back to the story. So he turns over 7 of Saul's grandsons, including 5 grandsons that Michal had raised. You might even wonder if this is David being frustrated at Michal for her still getting angry at him when the Ark of the Covenant was brought back to Israel. And he says, okay, if I got to turn over 7, this is another way for me to deal with this wife that gave me such a hard time. I don't know for sure, but I wonder. Verse number 9, and he delivered them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them in the hill before the Lord. And they fell all 7 together, and were put to death in the days of harvest, in the first days in the beginning of barley harvest. So the Gibeonites receive these 7 men, and they hang them all. This is a really bizarre story here, and we're going to try to talk about it and parse it out as we go along. Verse 10, and Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth, and spread it for her upon the rock, from the beginning of harvest until water dropped upon them out of heaven. There's the rain. And suffered neither the birds of the air to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. So the Gibeonites, they hang these 7 men, and then they just leave their bodies there to rot and decay. And Rizpah shows up, and she's keeping the buzzards and the crows and all the critters that would feast on these bodies away. And it was told David what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done. Remember, 2 of these men were Rizpah's sons. And so she's there being a good mother, trying to keep the birds off of the corpses of her sons and their cousins. And David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from the men of Jabesh Gilead, which had stolen them from the street of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them, when the Philistines had slain Saul in Gilboa. So when Saul and Jonathan were killed, the bones ended up stolen, and these men of Jabesh Gilead had them in their possession. So David goes and he retrieves these bones. And he brought up from thence the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son, and they gathered the bones of them that were hanged. So he goes to the Gibeonites and reclaims these bodies that the Gibeonites had hung. So now Saul, Jonathan, and these 7 men, they have all of their bones. And the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son buried they in the country of Benjamin, in Zelah, in the sepulchre of Kish his father, and they performed all that the king commanded. And after that, God was entreated for the land. So, let's break this down, because this sounds really bizarre, and it sounds out of character for the Lord. But there's some nuance here that we need to break down. So in the end here, David takes the bones of these 9 men, Jonathan and Saul included, and he gives them a proper burial back at the family burial site. Saul's father was named Kish, if you didn't know that or had forgotten. So, what's happening here? Here are the highlights of the story. There's a famine in Israel. David said, "Why is there a famine?" God said, "I'm judging Israel for Saul's choice to mistreat the Gibeonites." And so David says, well, if I can go to the Gibeonites and make it right with them, maybe this famine will end. And so he goes, and they said, "We don't want money. We don't want you to kill anybody. Turn over 7 of Saul's sons for us. We're going to hang them." And so David does do this, and the daughter of 2 of the 7 men are there to make sure that the bodies aren't desecrated by beasts and birds and fowls. And then David decides to give all of them a proper burial. And then the famine ends. It almost seems as though human sacrifice appeases God to lift the famine off of Israel. And that's not exactly what's happening here. God is not a God that delights in human sacrifice. He is not that way. When God told Abraham to take Isaac to the mountain and slay him there as a sacrifice, God never intended for Abraham to do that. He was testing the commitment of Abraham's heart to the Lord, but he never intended for Abraham to take the life of Isaac. And here, God isn't exchanging the lives of 7 men to lift the famine. God is judging Israel with a famine because of what Saul did. And then, when David goes to the Gibeonites and says, "How can we make this right?" they said, "We want the lives of 7 of Saul's sons. He took our sons, we want his sons." And so David turns them over. Right or wrong, debatable, he does it. And then they hang those men. And then David goes back to God and says, "Lord, the Gibeonites are satisfied now that the sons of Saul have been given to them for their revenge." And then God lifts the famine that the people were going through. God didn't require the lives of these men. He didn't say, "If you'll sacrifice 7 men, I will lift the famine." God is just giving the Gibeonites their restitution for what Israel had done to them. Israel had wronged them. Israel had made a promise that they would leave them alone and that they would be an ally to them. And instead, Saul, in his pride and power-hungry arrogance, goes after the Gibeonites and wounds them significantly. And so when David goes to make it right, he says, "What do you want?" And they said, "We want the sons of Saul." And so he turns them over to them. And then after the Gibeonites are appeased, then God lifts the famine. He doesn't do it because the men were offered. He does it because the Gibeonites are appeased. That may seem like splitting hairs, but there's a significant difference between the two. So that's the first part of this chapter. Now, the verse 15 through the end, the Philistines come back into play. Moreover, the Philistines had yet war again with Israel. And David went down, and his servants with him, and fought against the Philistines, and David waxed faint. So David goes to fight this time around. He's getting to be an older man at this point, understand. David rules Israel 40 years. This is getting to be the end of his tenure. How old was he when he took the kingdom? I don't know. Is he 25? Somewhere in there, perhaps. I've not looked at a timeline. I'm not sure. And so, is he 60 plus years old at this point? Very possibly. And so, here's a 60-year-old man going down to fight, and he waxes faint, meaning he's exhausted, he's tired, it's too much for him. And Ishbibanob, how about that for a name? Ishbibanob, which was of the sons of the giant. Remember, the Philistines had numbers of men who were giant men, 9 feet tall and upward. He was of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass in weight. He, being girded with a new sword, thought to have slain David. So while the battle's going on, this Ishbibanob, is that right? Ishbibanob, yeah. They think that he's killed David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, succored him and smote the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David swear unto him, saying, Thou shalt go no more out with us to battle, that thou quench not the light of Israel. They said, David, you're too old for this. It's time to hang it up, time to retire. And David doesn't go to battle anymore. And it came to pass after this that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite slew Saph, which was of the sons of the giant. And there was again a battle in Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jaararagim, a Bethlehemite, slew the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And there was yet a battle in Gath. So this is the 4th battle with the Philistines, where was a man of great stature, that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number. How about that? A guy with 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. We look for 10 and 10. His mother saw 12 and 12, 20 and 4, 24 in number. He also was born to the giant. And when he defied Israel, Jonathan the son of Shimeah, the brother of David, slew him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. And so these descendants of Goliath, 4 different battles, one of them almost killing David, and he has to retire. So there it is. That describes life pretty well, doesn't it? Life is a time of trade-offs and of defeats and setbacks, and then things righting themselves. Things, you get too old for certain things, you got to try something else, and then just battle after battle after battle, and sometimes the same opponents rear their head. You know, we talk about the practice of forgiveness, the practice of humility. Some of these things, Paul said it himself. He said, I die daily, meaning that he dies to his own nature. He dies to his own self. Every single day we've got to fight certain battles and overcome these things that are trying to hold us back. All right, there it is. David's life continues. Part number 40 here wrapped up, and we'll continue tomorrow, see what else is going on. Thanks so much for watching. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.